Good morning and welcome to the Diocese of Washington's School for Christian Faith and Leadership and our course, Prayer Partners, Bridging the Gap. I am the Reverend Emily Snowden and I am the project coordinator for the school. I'll be your digital host today, so if you have any technical questions, you can message me directly in the chat. We are so glad you are here. Today is a rich opportunity to learn from our own Reverend Shivaun Wilkinson about how to use prayer partners to strengthen your community intergenerationally. We welcome you to type your name and where you are from in the chat and greet one another. But first, a little bit about Shivaun. Siobhan Wilkinson is the Associate Rector at St. John's Episcopal Church in Olney, Maryland. A graduate from the University of California at Berkeley, she's a transplant to the DC area from California. She served God's church growing up in the Diocese of Los Angeles, and then served as the youth and family minister at St. Margaret's Episcopal Church in Palm Desert, becoming a founding member of the Diocesan Youth Council in the Diocese of San Diego. After graduating from the Virginia Theological Seminary in 2012, she has spent this first 9 years of her priesthood exploring how to craft discipleship paths in parishes, service 3 individual parishes, as well as serving as a regional chaplain, consulting with parishes on how to build more holistic formation ministries. Her call and passion are intergenerational ministries and simultaneous learning. A mother of 4 elementary age children, she is focused on creating formation ministries that recognize that formation happens every day of the week, and the role of the church is empowerment and equipment for individuals and households to go out and do the work they have been given to do here. And now I will turn it over to the Reverend Shivaun Wilkinson.
Well, good morning. I am just so excited to share this with you. I will admit, I don't think there is anything that changes the dynamics of a parish as quickly and as efficiently as finding ways to intergenerational prayer partnership. So let me give you a little background on how this started. I was working as a consultant for the Northern Montgomery County region of my diocese, which was 7 churches, and I was bouncing around between them, sort of consulting for various rectors, helping them and their lay leadership in various formation ministries, troubleshoot, so to speak. And so St. John's contacted me before I was their associate and said, so we have this problem. We really value children in worship. We want them there. And we have some older congregants who complain every single time they make any noise at all. So we have both a growing segment of young families, which is sort of the dynamic of this area in general right now, is it's a lot of people who are retiring and some therefore moving out or downsizing, and then a number of young families moving in. So we were getting tons of young families visiting, and then older parishioners were upset about the noise. And perhaps this is a complaint you've heard before. So I sat down with the rector and we started talking about ways that we could create parish-wide buy-in to this situation. And by the time we could get started on it, I was already their associate, but it had been something in our brains and in the mix for a long time that we needed to create a cross-pew pollination is what we call it, so that people who were used to having it their way, both directions, whether it's young families used to doing a lot of things that are very young family catered and focus on that, or who are used to a certain type of church and a certain type of silence and a certain type of demeanor and respect in church, that they interacted with one another in such a way that instead of approaching things with frustration, they approached things with curiosity. So what we did is that we started pairing off parishioners who had at least teenagers or older, or no children at all, but that sort of age category. So we were sort of aiming at 50s or older, with young children in the parish, the elementary school kids of the parish. This ministry has grown, and now all of our teenagers and middle schoolers also have prayer partners. And we are now looking at, after COVID, finding other ways of cross-pollinating between some amount of generational gaps and mentorships between even our adult to adult parishioners. Because as we all know, not everybody, regardless, is super child friendly or has interest in like hanging out with small kids. So we tried to mix it up and we tried to match by type. So I'm going to give you sort of a rundown of how we did it and what we did and what we've seen. And then I'll take questions at the end. Let me share my screen really fast. Wait, that's the wrong button. Boop, boop, boop. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so as I said, we like to call this our cross-pew pollination technique. Almost everything we do, we have information. We try to have that mantra in mind of how do we cross-pollinate between subsets and categories and cliques, or however the various groupings work in your own parish. So the way that we did it is that we started just inviting in 1,000 ways for adults to be a part of this. We opted in all of the kids. So we picked an age, we said at 3 years old, we would start, and we aimed through 5th grade at first was our target category. We let all the parents know that we were opting in their kid unless they chose to opt them out. And we had no parent opt out their child. Everybody was really excited at the premise of having an adult paired with their kid. So we did the, congregation-wide announcements, but I also made it my joy to be a constant cheerleader and constant inviter of this. So if I went to forum group with, a group of which tends to be our retired parishioners, I would sit and I would be like, and we're looking for prayer partners and we'd love to have you. And I would extol all the amazingness of it. I would invite individually. If I was making my rounds during coffee hour, if I was having a conversation with someone, I would always invite them to become a prayer partner. We made the ask very easy and open-ended. We said, all we're really asking you to do is have a kid that you're responsible to pray for. We picked quarterly, there'd be a quarterly parish-wide event. And we're like, and if you're not available that Sunday, you just get in touch with your prayer partner and let them know that you're away or whatever. But that ultimately we were just asking them that the heavy lifting, so to speak, was continuing to keep this child in their prayers, to occasionally check in with the family, like if they hadn't seen them for a few Sundays, to like make that phone call or that email connection and say, hey, I haven't seen you, wondering what's going on. To ask questions like, what can I pray for you about this month or this week? Is anything going on with you? And it became a very easy commitment. So right off the bat, we had 40 adults sign up to be prayer partners in the process. And again, I want to say that we definitely had some of those people start with a no. And so we tried very hard to press thoughtfully on that no without being pushy. Because like I said, there are definitely people who kids are not their thing. And we respect and honor that because, we all have our things that we're better at and things that we're not as good at. But when someone told us no, we would ask thoughtfully, like if they would explain why, or if there was something holding them back. And some of those no's over time became yeses, because sometimes it was just they felt like, well, I haven't been around little kids in so long. I don't know that I have anything to offer a 4 or 5 year old. And then we could say, well, if you feel more comfortable with a 4th grader, if you want to talk to a 9 or 10 year old, we can do that. So we started making connections that way. We purposely set up prayer partnerships with interests in mind. So if I knew an older parishioner was I have one gentleman in his 80s who's super, super academic, has a PhD, memorizes every college that every parishioner has graduated from and can come back and refer to them to you. In forum groups, every book he suggests is some heady academic text that's heavily annotated. So I purposely picked a kid that was super inquisitive and was super bookish and was that kid. So immediately I knew that there was going to be some common ground between the two of them, despite one being 7 and one being 83. We planned our first event for our initial ask, so that once we paired them in the pairing, we said, and put this date on your calendar for spaghetti dinner. And I'm going to show you that invitation email that we sent. We did that individually to each pairing, which is a dilly, because you got to email out each set individually. But that way the parents were copied if the kid was old enough to have email, which our first set, none of the kids were old enough to have email. In general, they were all elementary school kids. And it was pre-pandemic. So now some of my elementary school kids do have emails, but it was prior to a lot of that happening. And then that way the parents were copied. They knew the names of the prayer partners. They had some contact information, and that made that percolate pretty fast. And then in that invitation, it said, we're going to do our first kickoff event at spaghetti dinner. The last thing I'll say about a successful kickoff is just don't assume that people know how to interact with each other. We are out of practice now after COVID especially, but even before then, our intergenerational workings are broken. Most people are not good at interacting. Even you take parents and you put them with kids, their own kids' ages, and not all parents are good at that, to make the initial connections, to find comfortability, to make those easy access roads. So we planned activities that helped facilitate conversations right off the bat, instead of assuming that if we sat kids down with adults, that the adults would know how to lead that interaction. Some obviously did, but not all did. And it definitely made for a shared activity and a really warm and inviting kickoff. What we tend to do, there it is. What we tend to do also is that when we do these 4 times a year events, we offer food. And so we plan it either right after church, so it's like a lunch picnic, or we come back and we do spaghetti dinner or something together, something easy, something cheap. But the other thing that we always do is we plan it around a prayer tool, so that the prayer partner events are very specific formation that not only are connecting the prayer partners and helping them interact with each other, but that we're offering a way to help facilitate prayer with one another. And I'm going to give you some examples of some ideas we've done, but that just sort of gives you an idea of how it is that we give them an interaction piece, is it always focuses around some way to pray with each other. The biggest question I get asked on a regular basis, because now we have 75 some prayer partners across our parish, is the safeguarding concern, which is entirely valid and takes some serious thought. The easiest method, the way we have worked around it, is that all church-sponsored official prayer partner events, like I said, there's about 4 a year, are on site and the parents are present in the room. We just do it in the one big parish hall. Kids sit with their prayer partners, but their parents are milling and around, like that. We are not doing a separate event where there's adults with children without their parents present. This has allayed almost all of our parental fears around initial getting to know a stranger, so to speak, within the parish. And it keeps everything basically above board, because I'm walking, the priest is, my rector is walking around, you have all the parents milling around, still interacting, because especially with the preschool set, it takes them a while, a lot of times, to warm to their prayer partner anyway. So you sort of have this facilitation happening on multiple directions, lots of open tables. And so you don't have small corners where you can say that, there's concern around it. You don't have any private space, any private conversations happening. This is the easiest way to get it kicked off. We also therefore know that other arrangements do happen between prayer partnerships. It's already been said that I have 4 children, and so my kids are a part of the prayer partner procedure. And so all of their prayer partners have made connections beyond just these 4 events, whether it's that they call and they want to talk to them, they send them birthday cards, they've dropped off birthday presents, especially during the pandemic. They've come by the house to drop off stuff. Prior to the pandemic, my oldest, who's 10, would go to lunch with her prayer partner. So there's that part of it. We make sure that all of those other arrangements, that if prayer partners would like to organize that, happen directly with, parents or guardians. They do not happen through the church. They are not sanctioned by the church. So that any of those conversations that happen, my now 5-year-old, her prayer partner wanted to host a Christmas tea party for her at his home with his wife. And actually he invited me and my youngest with her, because the 2 toddlers sort of came, and they did this big, beautiful tea party for them. That all happened through me, not through the church at all. And so there's parents who have no interactions with their prayer partners outside of this, or that they keep everything very, very on property still, that like if they happen to sit together during church or at coffee hour, again, like all of it happens through the parents, therefore not the church. You can ask all prayer partners to take, safeguarding or safe church, depending on whatever denominational affiliation you have and whatever requirements they have around that. But that as an initial ask becomes a much larger commitment, because you're not just saying, I just want you to pray for this kid. You're now saying, I want you to sit through this big training, whether it's online or it's in person. We have found that after we have made some of the prayer partner connections and after they've done some of the 4 times a year, if we would like people to then take safeguarding, we find that a much easier ask after they've committed in with their kid. And then all of a sudden you're like, you know how much you love Isaac? Well, we're asking everybody who's a prayer partner to come and do this online training or in-person training for one Saturday. Just keep everybody safe, keep all the activities in a way that we protect all our children. And we found once that connection has been made, people are more likely to say yes to taking a further step into commitment, which is why we found it easiest to start with these very official, on property, in front of everybody, with parents in front of them beginnings. But you will find your own comfortability with this, and whether or not you would like to first right off the bat be like, every prayer partner needs to be trained. It makes us feel better and feel like it's a safer environment. That's going to be a call between you and your church leadership. Oh, let me see. All right. So this is the first email. This, like I said, this is my oldest daughter's name. In the midst of this is how we emailed out. We emailed out to each parent and prayer partner specifically. It was a format email that I had to sit and insert names into. So this is what we asked. We asked them to commit to praying for each other each day as best they are able, to check in with one another on Sundays when you are both at church and see how one another's doing, and see if there's any specific prayer requests. If you haven't seen your prayer partner in a while due to illness or vacation, try to write a card, make a phone call, check in somehow, let them know you're still praying with each other. This has been amazing during COVID. The prayer partners have taken a huge leadership. We supplied our younger prayer partners with basically a format, those old school style on cardstock letters that you can show on the backside, like how you do a dress. And if you just fold it in thirds, you can add a stamp. We could print those ourselves. And so we printed out like a blank sheet on the front, and then the way to address an envelope on the back, basically with the stamp. And we've been handing them out to our kids. And we find that the kids will fill out letters and then fold them up. The parents seal them up with a sticker, and then they put a stamp on it. And the kids are able to mail their prayer partners letters in the midst of this. We definitely have had Zoom sessions. We did Advent wreath making over Zoom with prayer partners. We have, but we have found 100, like in the grand majority of situations, that prayer partners have, especially the adult side, have taken initiative to make sure their little prayer partners feel loved and prayed for in the midst of COVID. So these connections have still happened. So we said our why right off the bat. Prayer partners are meant to foster healthy Christian mentorship across St. John's Parish. We hope that both prayer partners feel loved and enriched, prayed for, and praying for another member of the congregation who is in a different phase of life and discipleship than she is. And then again, we did our ask. This was in 2018. So it was right after Easter. We had a spaghetti dinner at 4 p.m. and we asked everybody to put it on their calendar. This is what we did right off the bat. We did these prayer cards, as you can see, if I can show you. Hang on a second. We did these prayer cards right off the bat, which was just sort of like a scripture quote. We had them fill that out and send it to their prayer partner of like, here's something I love and I'm good at, and I'm asking you to pray for me for blah, blah, blah. And that was one of our first introductions was, here's this. The very first event, this is what we did together, was this All About Me guide. We gave them each one to do together so that they wrote their answers on the same sheet of paper. And they sat and they discussed these things. So this wasn't something they filled out prior. This is something they filled out together. And it gave all sorts of questions that we were trying to sort of get to their likes and interests and where they might connect. And we found that this worked gangbusters, that they sat with this very easy worksheet and they sat and they filled it out. And then they took the words home with each other so that they could do these things for each other. They knew each other's birthdays. They knew when to pray for each other. They knew things they were afraid of, things they hoped for, something they loved, something special about them. It was a great topic. Again, we served food. So they ate spaghetti, they filled out these forms, and then we did a little evening prayer service together. It was a really special occasion. Other things we've done together is we've walked labyrinths together. We have a labyrinth out front. We did a finger labyrinth first together to talk about what a labyrinth was and how we do it prayerfully. We prepped our partners both directions on the different styles of prayer labyrinths, because adults tend to walk them meditatively and thoughtfully, and kids tend to run them like little banshees. And we let them know there's no wrong way to pray. So try it your partner's way. And so we had older parishioners with taking their kids by the hand and walking meditatively through the labyrinth, and then coming out and then running it the second time, and then talking about the joy of both types of prayer, and how it met their needs differently. We also talked about a quadrilateral about my images of God, ways I want to be a better disciple, things I'm thankful for, things I'm worried about, which was, again, an exercise in talking about, that we do see God differently, and talking about where we see God and how we see God, and our own personal goals around discipleship, because we recognized, again, that when you have adults and kids in a space, their goals for discipleship and their images of God might be different. And so we helped facilitate some of that conversation. So before I sort of open up to a number of questions and answers, and we can kind of go through more of this process, here's some pictures of prayer partners. So I will say a couple things. So my kids, you already heard, I'm a transplant from California. So our kids' grandparents all live far away. And our schools, though, still do like a special visitor grand friend sort of day. And it means that our kids, unless we set it up months in advance, can't have their grandparents at that, because they have to fly. And we have to plan it, and there's jobs involved and all that kind of stuff. We have invited our kids' prayer partners to come as their grand friends to school for the last few years, and they have all come. So they come to the elementary school with our kids and sit and have donuts and sit and do their morning. Like, we have prayer partners who have taken off work so that they can be in class with their little prayer partner and be their grand friend for their Grand Friends Day. So again, not church sponsored. That was just something we worked out amongst them, but that's one of the things that has happened. Another thing that has happened is that we have seen mentorships grow from elementary school kids. Now that it's been a few years, some of those kids are now in the process of confirmation. And so now all of a sudden their prayer partner has transformed into their confirmation mentor. And that's been huge, because there's been such a relationship already built in that. And so to watch them take such pride, and now they're what was a 5th grader when we started, now incoming 9th grader, working through confirmation, and them getting to, instead of deal with all these like little cute activities as prayer partners, now they recommend books, and now they are talking through the faith, and that they pose questions to each other about the catechism. And that's been a real joy to hear about. In this bottom corner over here, where you see the two that are masked, that's my 5-year-old, Naomi. And that's her prayer partner, Mr. Bill. And so I will say that one of the terrible things that has happened as a result of prayer partners, in the best possible sense, is it's made it extremely hard to reopen our church, because all our little people are paired with older adults. And so we have a category who can't get vaccinated with the category most at risk for COVID. That we've been trying to figure out how to work through. And thankfully, Mr. Bill is a real trooper. So the very first day that we opened in-person worship again, Mr. Bill came to church, and my daughter came to church. And she literally, oh, poor Mr. Bill, took a running leap at him across the parish when she saw him, and ran and like jumped into his arms. And he was fully vaccinated, and he was comfortable with the situation, thankfully. But that's been like our reality, is that our kids getting back with their prayer partners has been like reunions, like you wouldn't believe. And so again, all prayer partners have different comfortability with that kind of stuff, and that they're navigating it in their own ways. But she now sits with Mr. Bill at outdoor church. And you can see this is Easter morning, which was our first outdoor service. And she was so happy to get to sit with Mr. Bill at church, which we had happening a lot before COVID started, is that we found to the initial problem, so to speak, of the noise in church, there has been nothing like it. That all of a sudden the kids who were noisy and their parents were trying to like wrangle them during a sermon, so many of them started sitting with their prayer partners instead of their parents, because they wanted to spend time with them. Again, that was all based on the parental permission and connections. And so we found that, as it turns out, when a parent isn't struggling with 3 kids and that kid is now sitting with a prayer partner who they look up to and isn't a parent who's not normally, trying to get them, they sit, they worship, they want to do the Lord's Prayer with their prayer partner. They do all sorts of ministries in the church, because if their prayer partner's ushering, they ask, can I usher with Mr. Stephen? We've watched kids suddenly blossom into all numbers of ministries because they want to sit and do things with their prayer partners across the board. The other thing is that this is one of our big first intergenerational shifts that we made as a parish. It was our first piece of heavy lifting in this regard. And it is what made intergenerational vacation Bible school possible, because suddenly kids were inviting their prayer partners to come to VBS with them. And so we saw buy-in across the board because the McQueens wanted to be there with their prayer partners to do VBS all together. We have found that picnics and parish-wide events suddenly really feel parish-wide, because suddenly there is that, it's not young families all sitting together because they know each other, and this group of, the Altar Guild sitting together, and we have a Monday Mission Society group. Like, it all of a sudden was this deep mixing of groups, because suddenly, like, the prayer partners or the parents of the kids and the prayer partners and stuff were talking and mingling and intermixing. I can't say enough that, like, the first step to shifting the entire dynamic of where children and adults feel welcome, of not seeing it as an us and them dynamic of who's getting what ministry, of creating buy-in across the board to do things all together as a parish. There has been nothing we have done that has been effective as quickly or as just joyfully as instituting prayer partners. So with that, I'm going to open it up if you have questions or ideas around this, because there's not a whole there. Everything sort of comes from an individual working of how your parish functions. And I'm happy to brainstorm or hear what you guys have done or are interested in hearing more about.
So I'll read the questions off from the chat so that folks who watch the recording later know the full question. From Bonnie, how often do you connect new prayer partners and how long is the commitment?
So we make it an open-ended commitment. We openly say there are some parishes who do it as a 1-year thing, and then they shift prayer partners every year, which is an option and has huge benefits, because then you get new prayer partners, you get new mixing. Our parish, we have just kept them connected so that they've stayed connected across the years. When someone moves away or there's an interest in shifting, we just make a shift. If a parent, like an adult says, we haven't had an adult opt out after they have a prayer partner unless they've moved thus far or have a bigger issue, a health issue. That's been one of the pieces, because we've tried really hard to not make it a huge commitment on our end, that what we ask of them is these 4 events. If they can't go, there's no guilt involved, that it happens. Sometimes it hits a weekend that you're not in town, and they tend to reorganize then and find a time to meet either at coffee hour or whatever with the kid around that somehow, whether it's before or after. But we haven't found a need to shift and do stuff. We had one prayer partner die over the period. She ended up with cancer and got very, very ill. And it was amazing because her prayer partner was see how old's Eva? Now Eva's a kindergartner. So she was about 4 at the time. And so her prayer partner was very ill, which the mom did sit down and have a conversation oh, well, we're not seeing Miss June in church because Miss June is in the hospital. Miss June is sick. And so her daughter was a bright light. Like she wanted to make cards every week then for Miss June that they mailed. They called her in the hospital, like her mom would organize it with Miss June's husband and son, and work it out so that Eva would call her occasionally and just say like, I'm still praying for you and I can't wait to see you. The couple of occasions in between chemotherapy that June appeared in church, like you have not ever seen a little 4-year-old so excited, or an older, frankly, cancer patient so excited. Like, I mean, they would come to each other and like talk like that and go through stuff. And so then when Miss June died, that happened at the beginning of COVID. And so that there wasn't a funeral option that was open. You know, it was like an 8-person quiet funeral, I think in Baltimore in the end. But Eva, her parents sat down with her, and then I had a Zoom conversation because again, it was early in COVID. And we talked it through and we prayed for Miss June. And then she did get a new prayer partner, like that we added in, but she still says her prayer partners are Miss June, who's in heaven praying for her, and Miss Belinda. And so we have found like it remained something in Eva's heart. And like there has not been a better way to talk about the communion of saints than these kids understanding these situations with their prayer partners. And so that's been really lovely. But I have met people who have chosen every year to shake up prayer partners, and that's absolutely an option. And it mixes it differently. It creates a different sort of connection. And you sort of choose what makes the most sense for your kids and your parish in that way.
Thanks, Siobhan. That's amazing. I'm going to try to combine a couple questions here because they're similar in nature. Sandy says, I don't think we have enough young people for interested adults. Any advice? And Bonnie asks, have you done this as an option for adults to partner with adults?
We didn't. So we didn't right off the bat start with adults, partnering with adults. It was in our long game of this. We were about to do it right during the Easter season, right after, March of 2020. So it was like in the game plan. We had moved up through high schoolers. We didn't start that way because we really were trying to troubleshoot the initial parish shifts of growing young families in the church. And so that's for our parish was where we needed to start, but we absolutely have it in mind to be doing adult to adult. I suggest the same methods in terms of like, you don't have like with kids, we just opted them in. And then we informed parents about it and said, you can opt them out if you would like to. And then we explained all of our safety mechanisms to make sure that like we weren't teaming their kid with some stranger and sending them off into like, the never land. And so none of our parents have opted out thus far. But adult wise, you don't have that same, we're just opting everyone in option because adults have a more sense of autonomy and independence. So the way that this has worked in a parish that I was connected to in California is that they just had adults sign up for prayer partners, and then they just started matching them that direction. I would keep a similar eye in terms of this cross pew pollination, where you purposefully select people that you don't think would interact otherwise. Whether it's generationally, whether it's just interest-wise, whether you just recognize that these are in differing sort of friendship groups in the parish, moving people around as much as possible so that they are praying for someone not of their own perspective has been wildly helpful. And we've definitely seen it as even with the parents of the young kids, because ultimately when you connect the kid, like little kids with an adult, you're also connecting the parents into that adultship. So what we have found is that sometimes of those gatherings, that there are adults that never, ever, ever would have sat down and had a conversation with these older mentors of the parish. But with when your leadership team has an eye to it, you can catch little details that they might have in common. So like we sneakily have connected an older parishioner who we know had adopted children with a family where the child was adopted. So obviously that doesn't come up necessarily in the kid to adult conversations, but suddenly we've made a connection between an adoptive family who's adoptive and now in their 60s or 70s and an adoptive family in their 30s or 40s. And there was just sort of for lack of a better phrase, a sneaky connection that we knew as pastors was going on behind the scenes that might make a conversation piece or a mentorship point, that there might need to be conversations or advice going on the line. So I would work the same function if you're doing adult to adult, and look for sneaky connections that they may not make on their own, that you as leadership or as pastoral roles in the parish have maybe a little more eye to. But definitely, like, connecting a conservative with a liberal in this time and place, amazing. It makes for an amazing reality to ask people to pray for each other when you know they might be heated about other aspects of their personality or life. There's just not a better way to forge a human connection than to ask somebody to pray for somebody, because they will. And then you all of a sudden might say, I completely disagree with them on X, but their mother's dying right now, and I am so involved in that process with them. So I would really advise that.
Sandy, does that answer your question about not having enough young people? Okay. How about a trial of summer prayer partners? Would that perhaps be less intimidating for folks to sign up?
It absolutely can. And you'll learn the ask, so to speak. Whatever the ask is, start light. So our ask was just not a lot of duties. And so people were willing to go for it. Some people, it is saying like a short period of time makes it a light ask for people, whether it's summer or whether it's, 1 year or like a school year. So you're going to have to read your congregation basically on what it would feel like to not be a pressure situation for them. The other upside, which I'll say we have found, is sometimes you get prayer partners that are phenomenal. And sometimes you get prayer partners that are lackluster and do the bare minimum. It's not terrible when that inequality happens and it's just different kids in different families, because if you have a kid in one family that has a prayer partner that only goes 4 times a year, but then you have, like, my kids' prayer partners all happen to be very engaged and they like bring birthday presents or they check in a lot. That's not such a problem. One of our parishioners has 3 children, 2 of which have phenomenally engaged prayer partners, and one of which has one that does like less than the bare minimum. So I will say the upside of finding short-term asks means that people who perhaps want to be moved out of prayer partners, or this isn't the right connection for them, you can move around because you'll start seeing how engaged or not engaged they are. Our situation has made it really amazing for the mentorships that are working, and harder on the families where there's one kid that's just like doesn't have a prayer partner that super engages with them. And we're still sort of figuring out how we might navigate that, whether it's encouraging that prayer partner to maybe go a little further, or helping in a non-judgmental way find out if that prayer partner is really engaged in this ministry, and maybe if they would like to step out, like that we can sort of reassess. But that's been the one tricky spot, and it's only happened on like 2 occasions that most of our prayer partners, once they got in with this sort of like light ask, have been stupendous and interested and engaged. But there's just been a couple people that just, we all know them, we all love them, they're beloved children of God, this isn't their ministry probably. So finding a way to sort of move them to maybe a different prayer partnership, maybe with just another adult or somebody that they connect better with, or if it's a lack of ideas or creativity, helping them to navigate engaging a little differently.
That's great advice. Thanks. Chris asks, how many children did you have that you opted into this partner program originally?
When we originally started, we opted in 25 kids. And some of those, I will openly admit, those are not all like the 25 we see every single week and are super committed. I did it on purpose. So if I knew of a family involved in church that I saw every Christmas pageant without fail, and they'd show up for those 4 weeks of Advent to prep for a Christmas pageant, but I wouldn't see them again until Easter Sunday. But I knew them by name, I absolutely opted them into a prayer partnership. And so it was definitely my method of trying to invite in a little deeper some of the families that considered this their parish, but didn't yet, hadn't taken some of all those steps in. And so I would say of that group at the time, we had probably 15 that showed up like 3 to 4 times a month, like of those families. And again, like, cause we happen to live in a very Catholic area. And so families of 3 or 4 kids are not super unusual. So we had a mix of probably about 7 to 8 families. And we had about 15 kids that were on a regular basis from about 3 years old to 5th grade that we opted in right off the bat as the first spaghetti dinner. And if you think about that, that's already 30 people involved in Prayer Partners ministry right off the bat. And then as that grew to the second prayer partner event, because that was, Easter, and then we did a kickoff in September with like a big picnic where we provided sandwiches from Safeway, and like we asked them to bring like a beverage to share. I forget, but it was something like picnicky. We did it after church. Excuse me. We had a whole lot of parents right before that who had been kind of halvesy, wanted their kids opted into it, that were like, gave us names and said like, we are all in. And then after that first one, we also had an easier lift with adults who wanted to be prayer partners because they saw the first event. They heard from that 1 or 2 people in their Monday Mission Society or Altar Guild or Usher group, or, we have a men's group on Thursday mornings that does our African Palms nonprofit packing. They were talking, and then they'd be like, oh, my prayer partner said the cutest thing. And then they sent me a little video for my birthday, and it was so precious. And all of a sudden we had more adults too interested in getting one. So like starting with that core group, with the addition of some of your ones that are a little bit outside on your fringes, but that own the church, that say it's their church, seem to sort of get us moving. And then, like I said, now we have, I want to say there's over 50 kids that have a prayer partner. But again, a lot of them therefore are like our once a month kids that like show up occasionally, whose parents call this their parish, but we wish they'd come a little more. And this was our means to sort of help them feel more connected into the parish through their children, that their children would feel more connected, they'd feel more comfortable.
That's great, thanks. Any suggestions for how to initiate in this process in parishes that haven't returned to in-person worship, right? Like in some cases, kids may not remember the older parishioners.
Right. This is a tricky reality. And so they don't. And frankly, like our own kids really even struggled with the prayer partners because they just didn't know where people went, that the beginning of COVID especially was really, really hard on little people, that they didn't. We have kids that don't remember going to church on a weekly basis at this point in the parish. And we have families who are very stressed about bringing their kids to worship because now with bubbles and things, they're concerned about how it is that I keep my kids doing that, because humans don't naturally bubble. Humans naturally are community driven. So we're fighting our evolution at this point to do it. So my suggestion would be to find ways to do it with pictures, sort of like a pen pal ministry, in the sense that like back in the day before we had social media and Zoom, there were ways in which we connected with people that you could like, I had a pen pal from France that I got through some program at some point, right? And we sent out that same form that I showed on the first slide of, what about me and when is my birthday and what's my favorite color and things I like. I would suggest doing it as a pen pal ministry at first, where you invite the prayer partner to send a picture and you give them that sheet and you say, fill this out for your prayer partner and send a picture, and then make it a pen pal ministry. Especially with little people who don't have email, it is exceedingly exciting that they get mail. So them getting a card or a letter from their new prayer partner that's praying for them somewhere else is super easy. And I'm happy to share those forms. I just made them on Pages, so I'm happy to send you PDFs of them. They were super simple. And then you can print them and you can send them to wherever you want to. But that will get you going, frankly. And you have the idea, the upside of your safe church no longer is a huge concern right off the bat. You can make connections without having to worry about how I'm putting these kids in rooms with adults. who may or may not be trained in safeguarding. You again have a reality where the kids and adults right now are craving connection. They're craving connection with people their own age. They're craving connection with people, outside their world. And so the other piece is that when you're in your own house, and you're deeply worried about so many things going on, or it's easy to get that tunnel vision of like all my perspective, all my time, all my worries. And so it is a huge ministerial benefit to start inviting people into each other's anxiety and worlds. Because there is nothing like hearing what someone outside of your own lifescape is worried about, to help you refocus and recommit and think about how I can be a service to them, which takes us out of our own heads sometimes in ways that are really, really helpful. So yeah, I would definitely include a picture. Kids really do appreciate it. And the beauty of now having things like Zoom is we do send videos. Like our kids do send videos back and forth with their prayer partners, singing happy birthday. These are people who are interested in all of those mundane details that other people in my life aren't. Like my son plays cello badly because he's 7, and his prayer partner wants videos of like, oh, show me, did you do a little recital? Could you please send me a little link of your song? And yeah, he's playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And, it's precious to me, but it's oddly precious to his prayer partner. And he's so excited and so proud that like Mr. Steven saw him play cello. And it goes back and forth that we've had seeds left in our driveway by prayer partners who are like, we've been gardening, so we wanted to share our new plant these right now, and they'll come up in 2 weeks. Or there's been the creativity of our prayer partners has been off the chain. We have found that we basically just make the connection, and that people start finding ways to connect after we give them the initial suggestions.
That's awesome. I think the last question formally, Cheryl had trouble signing on and missed how you select partners. So if I can't remember if you had a slide that said that, or if you could just go over that again.
What we did is that we opted in every kid when we picked an age. We decided 3 because we wanted them to be able to interact with their prayer partner. Although for some kids, 3 was too young. So that one was one we did talk to the parents about at 3 and 4, where we were like, how shy is your kid? And how much comfortability will they have with somebody else talking to them? 5 is the sweet spot for most kids. Around kindergarten, they're pretty good about this, but that preschool age set, depending on your kid, depends on their engagement level. And so we absolutely had some 3 and 4 prayer partnership. We invited mentors across the parish. We did it through blast emails. We did it through announcements at church. And then we did it because I am a naggy cheerleader, and I went and talked to absolutely every person I could find and invited them to be a prayer partner. And I tried to find, if they had a no, I tried to push a little bit in a non-pushy way about why, and saw if it was just like, oh, I don't really do well with really little kids, or I just don't know that I have anything to offer talking to a kid. We talked through some of that, and I would say 75% of those no's became yeses, depending on if we could just give them an older kid, or if we guaranteed that we would support their, time trying to figure out how to talk to a 5-year-old because they were out of practice, or whatever it was that their concern was around that. And we tried as lay leaders and as their pastor to figure out where it was their comfortability, things that they had connection with. So if I had a super egghead adult, I tried to match him with a super egghead kid. If my daughter's super crafty, so I tried to pair her with someone who I kind of knew that was in her bandwidth. What my 5-year-old was funny. So Mr. Bill, the one I showed you a picture of, that one, he actually asked specifically for her because he has 4 grown daughters. And he was like, I have 4 strong-willed daughters and I'm ready to take on another one. And my Naomi is a force to be reckoned with. So we were like, you take her, that's fine. And it has been like a prayer match in heaven, because he was used to a strong-willed little girl who wants to be sassy and get on my roof, frankly, 3 times. And that was his jam. He was just like, I'm in. Like his girls grew up on a farm out in Laytonsville area. And he was like, we're in. So it was done thoughtfully and we just sort of made connections. And so sometimes we knew connections existed, sometimes we didn't. But across the board, they've all found ways to connect and talk to one another. The last thing, in case you didn't catch it, is that we also, if we knew there was a connection between the parents and the other adult, we sometimes made that connection. If we knew that there was like an adoption history, or we knew that there was some sort of a connection that we thought might help the parents facilitate the prayer partner relationship, we added that in. But we definitely went for people we didn't think would interact normally, and we tried really hard to make it so that they were going to be successful and happy together as best we could. And it has mostly worked out. As it turns out, most people want to get to know other people, so they've been delightful, and we have seen all sorts of ministries blossom out of it.
So you didn't use interest sheets to partner people. You just sort of did it based on your own knowledge and.
Right. We did not use interest sheets. We did it on our own knowledge. You could, if you're doing adults, you could do interest sheets. Our one big concern, though, like I said earlier, is that we really believe in cross-pollination. And we were worried if we relied too much on matching people by connections, that we would end up matching a lot of people who already interacted in some ways. And so we tried to use back information that we might know about them, but that might not come across as big in the parish on that front.
Have you tried inviting parishioners in nursing homes to be prayer partners?
So we actually do have, they were connections that we already knew from our parish that we knew were shut in, I hate that term, in nursing homes, somehow couldn't come out. So we have a couple of those that are prayer partners. And we talked specifically to the family before we made those connections, because we knew that it meant that they would never see their prayer partner at coffee hour, and their prayer partner wouldn't show up at prayer partner events most of the time. So we did that more specifically and made sure we made invitations. The other one we have is we have an adult who signed up to be a prayer partner who has autism and is a fully functioning adult, but you definitely know that he is not on the normal range of interaction socially, and doesn't make eye contact. A number of the things, like the tried and true autistic diagnoses, are him. But he was very interested in having a prayer partner. And so we also went to a specific family that we thought would have a kid that this would respond well with, and we knew would have some grace in this situation. And we could say, so we have this wonderful gentleman, you know him, his name is blah, blah, blah. He has autism, but he's very interested in being a prayer partner. And so we just wanted to talk it through, because he's not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z the same way. And we found that doing that pre-conversation, that it would look a little different than other types of prayer partnership. And keeping in mind that family, that sometimes that's the right fit for a family. We actually paired one of the nursing home parishioners with a family who does travel baseball. And so they're almost never in our parish, but they stay connected. And so it actually worked out much better, that they were like, we would much rather schedule time with our prayer partner going to visit them in the nursing home when we can do it, than expect to be here on specific Sundays because the baseball schedule dictates a lot of their life. So it absolutely works. You just have to sort of thoughtfully make those connections based on what you know about the partnership.
That's great. Thanks. Any other questions, friends, before we conclude our time together? There's been lots of comments about how helpful this has been, so thank you. Oh, Chrissy, I have to say, most Zoom classes don't make me teary with hope for our church. That's great.
That's really sweet.
Yeah, this is really exciting ministry, and I hope that those of you who put it into place have great success. From Bonnie, how do you help people when their partners don't show up at the events?
We try to do a lot of headway ahead of time, that we make it really clear that the expectation is to let your prayer partner know if you can't be there for any reason. And if for some reason that doesn't come through, or even if it does come through, but like siblings are there and then you're there without yours, we try, like I said, all the parents are there, and not all the parents yet have prayer partners, because especially parents who have a lot of preschoolers and toddlers, like we haven't been super eager to get them prayer partners because they're usually having to do a lot of running in the midst of the prayer partner event. So what we have found is a lot of those parents will volunteer and like will sit down with said other kid who's sad because their prayer partner couldn't be there to paint prayer rocks with them, which was one of our ministries, is that they painted one of those river rocks to give to their prayer partner to put on their nightstand as a reminder to pray for them. And so they still wanted to paint a prayer rock for their prayer partner. And so we had another parent of a kid who hadn't been paired to be a prayer partner sat down and said, like, I'm happy to sit down and paint with you. How wonderful. And then they helped plan it as a gift for their prayer partner. So we've navigated it that way. And I never have a prayer partner so that I can circulate. And so I can do the same and sit down with kids who end up being alone at a prayer partner event one way or another. But usually our prayer partners are pretty good about communicating. And then the parents do a good pre-planning with their kid about, oh, you know, Miss Jane can't be there today, but she is praying for you and we're going to do the activity and send it to her, or see her next week with with it.
Awesome. That's great. Well, there's lots of thank yous in the chat. Folks are really excited to put this into practice. So someone asked about the forms that Shivaun posted. What we'll do is we have a toolbox link for this course, and I'll have Shivaun send me those pieces, and we'll put that in there and send out the toolkit link with the recorded video so that you have all of this at your fingertips and can go back and access it. Feel free to share this with your clergy folks or vestry if they need some extra information. But we hope that you can use this in all of the ways that make it feasible for you all. So with that, thank you so much, Shivaun. Thank you everyone for being here. We'll get the recording sent out here in the next couple of days with the toolbox link. And if you have any other questions, feel free to email me, and we'll make sure you get connected. So thank you again, and take care, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.